It is the first visit to China in 3 years by Emmanuel Macron. On his mind, not just Russia's invasion of Ukraine, but trade relations between the European Union and Beijing. The French president has been keen to stress that Europe must resist reducing trade and diplomatic ties with China. That will not go down well in Washington. On meeting his Chinese counterpart, Mr. Macron urged Xi Jinping to use his influence to persuade Russia to stop the war.
L'agression russe en Ukraine a porté un coup.
The Russian aggression in Ukraine has dealt a blow to stability. It ended decades of peace in Europe. I know I can count on you, moreover, under the two principles I've just mentioned, to bring Russia to its senses and everyone to the negotiating table. And we will come back to this in detail, but we need to find a lasting peace. That is to say, a peace that respects internationally recognized borders and avoids any form of escalation.
As both leaders agreed that nuclear weapons must not be used in this war, Xi implied that countries arming Ukraine are escalating the conflict.
Regarding the Ukrainian crisis, China advocates for peace talks and seeks a political solution. China is willing to join the French in calling on the international community to maintain restraint and avoid taking actions that will further aggravate the crisis or even get out of control.
European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen also in Beijing, as the EU sends a clear signal it fully backs Ukraine. The president telling reporters she'd advised Xi to extend his diplomatic reach to the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. The word is, China is willing to do that. Dialogue and cooperation on trade, however, just as much an issue between these two economic blocs, with a 50-strong business delegation also on the visit. Well, I'm joined now by Ray Zhong from the Kissinger Institute, the Washington-based think tank on China and US relations. Ray Zhong, thanks very much indeed for being with us. Is China genuinely a credible force for some kind of beginnings of peace in Ukraine?
Well, what I can say for sure is that from what we've heard from Xi Jinping, that it's on his terms, not Putin's, not von der Leyen's, not Macron's, and not Biden, that China enters and actively facilitates any peace talks regarding Russia-Ukraine. So this is a moment for him that he's in a position for mediation, but also a lot of diplomatic leverage on where things go. And for Xi Jinping, no foreign policy is without certain types of, strategic opportunities for the Chinese government to attain certain foreign policy goals that it desires.
Right. Well, briefly, you say it's on his terms. What are those terms?
Well, his terms, if you look at his position on the Russia-Ukraine war so far, they've kind of been hedging. He hasn't really, invested as much military and security resources into Russia as somebody who's allied with Russia would. But at the same time, the propaganda work, how it's framed by Chinese diplomats and other types of officials, you can't really characterize that China has been as supportive of Ukraine as the French and also the broader EU. So,
well, certainly not. That's an understatement, isn't it?
No.
I'm interested here. I understand that, I think this is the case, Xi Jinping has met Vladimir Putin more than 40 times. Does that mean he is hopelessly one-sided in this whole business and hopelessly pro-Kremlin, frankly? Or does it mean he's supremely well-placed to get some sort of breakthrough?
I think the metric to watch is what types of policy decisions that the Chinese Foreign Ministry, that the PLA puts forth, as opposed to meetings. These meetings, obviously the symbolic meaning of them are really important, but at the end of the day, especially when it's something where logistics dominant states today, like the Russia-Ukraine war, what kind of resources China is and isn't willing to extend, what it's deciding in terms of energy policy towards Russia and Russian energy. I think those are far more concrete stakes to keep an eye on.
Right, well, we will indeed be keeping an eye on those. But in terms of today's visit by the two European presidents, they are very different from Washington. They want to maintain trade links, indeed build trade links and economic links with China. Now, the US is going in exactly the opposite direction. I sense Beijing will see division and therefore weakness in that.
Well, the thing that you have to really think about in regards to Brussels and Paris is that they are not the United States. They do not trade using the US dollar. They do not have Silicon Valley. They also do not have the same kind of defense capabilities as the United States. And this is something China is very aware of. It's also something that DC is aware of. But in this specific case, this changes what types of carrots and sticks, incentives and disincentives that the Chinese state would offer them. And what von der Leyen discussed in a speech prior to leaving Europe was this idea of, de-risking, which is different from maybe some of the terms that Washingtonian officials and analysts have used, which is decoupling.
Rejong, I'm afraid the clock is against. We'll have to leave it there, but clear signs of division that you've highlighted there. Thanks very much.